Welcome.
Call this meeting to order. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Heavenly Father, be with us this evening as we do the business for the city and the good and welfare of the community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Item C, approval of the agenda. This is the approval of the agenda for June 14th being today, 2021, Planning Commission regular meeting.
Make a motion, we approve the agenda?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item D, citizens' comments, and gentleman in the back is going to be representing the developer for item H1. So, Mr. Chair, if you would like, you can close this portion of the citizens' comments.
There are no citizen comments, so I would like to close the citizen comments.
Very good. Item E, approval of the minutes. As most of you are aware, we had a joint planning commission, city council, governing body session workshop on May 10th, and we discussed several different items. And at this point, we would be looking for a motion and second for the approval of the minutes.
I couldn't find any typos, but it took 2 hours to read them.
You're welcome.
That's impressive, whoever typed those.
I did type it all, yes.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item F, Board of Zoning, there were none, so we're going to switch to item G, old business. So G1, sign regulation amendment. Quick background, sign regulations of City of Goddard help to regulate the types and number of signs existing in city limits, as these regulations can be changed with approval of the Planning Commission and of the governing body or the City Council. On March 21st, 2016, the governing body approved changing the sign regulations to include a stipulation that mandates all signs be brought up to the code by December 31st, 2021 of this year. That was Ordinance 783. This new code does not classify pole signs and would require all commercial signs to be converted to monument signs by the end of the 2021 year. On May 10th, 2021, the Planning Commission and the City Council governing body discussed sign regulations in detail. The City Planner and myself created a draft amendment reflecting these comments, which is being presented today. So the current regulations are found in Article 7. Article 7 of sign regulation has 5 parts: sign permits, classification of signs, general standards, exemptions, and district regulations. Green has been added, red with a little slash through it has been removed, and black stayed exactly the same. So I might actually flip the slide off, it might be easier to read with the contrast. Is that better? So, green being added, red being removed, black staying the same. This is part 1 of the sign regulations. The subject matter of the sign, including the topic discussed or the idea or message expressed, shall play no role in determining whether to grant or deny a permit. This is being added per the city attorney. He specifically said that due to new existing regulations and lawsuits, the city should explicitly express this so that there is no concern about something being prohibited based on freedom of speech. All signs lawfully existing at the time of passage of these regulations may remain in use, but the sign must conform to these standards no later than December 31st. This is being struck from that portion of the regulations per discussions that we had on May 10th. I have added now, all signs lawfully existing at a time of passage of these regulations may remain in use, but the sign must conform to these standards upon the sale of the property. Any legal non-conforming signs cannot be repaired as is. It must comply with these standards and be converted to a conforming sign if the sign needs to be repaired. So this would be the bulk of it that's going to be changed. Are there any questions or comments on that part? Does it conform with what was being expressed on May 10th?
I don't remember that last sentence, but I like it.
Except what extent was the repair? I mean, is that
A complete demolition and then a repair of the sign being removed and then another pole sign being erected. So minor repairs would be allowed.
is that spelled out somewhere?
No, it'd just be right here, and then it would have to be kind of discussed at the time of the permit when it's being submitted. But if it's a complete tear down and a brought back up, we would consider that a no-go, and they would have to convert to a monument sign. Minor alterations don't qualify as complete repair. If you want, I can change that up a little bit more to make it be more black and white, that if a pole needs to be completely brought down, a pole sign cannot be re-erected, if that
I would think so. I mean, just because if I was a business, I'd be like, well, that means I can't, I mean, that way it's written, it might
Sure.
Change the
Remote.
spelling.
just, it might promote, okay, they're not gonna repair anything because they don't wanna have to rebuild it.
Sure.
You know,
Mhm.
even minor repairs.
Changing light bulb.
Right, or let's say, the sign part, gets ruined or something.
I could certainly do that.
Sorry to interrupt. No, I just, you need to hear all of my,
Oh, no, I mean, yeah, if anyone else has any comments on this portion of it, and we want to make sure that we got as clearly as we could what was being conveyed on May 10th between the planning commission and the governing body. 101, so this is part 2 of sign regulations. This has come up before, and so I figured I'd pass it before the planning commission, obviously, because it's a monument sign as it was defined is right here, but then it said to qualify as a monument sign, the base material must be at least 50% the length and width of the display area of the sign. So we're going to show you another example here. Either we keep that in and then we add another type of sign, which is a freestanding sign, a sign which is independent of the building but does not conform to all the requirements of a monument sign. And the reason this came up is because of this. That's not in the city, but there's other examples of this. You can see right here that this is 50% of the display area. This is 50% of the length and width of the base material. Clearly that doesn't conform, so is that a pole sign? I mean, it wouldn't be considered a pole sign, but it wouldn't be considered a monument sign either. So either we have to remove this portion that says it has to be that way, or we leave that portion in and add a new type of sign. So I leave that at the discretion of the planning commission, how you feel you would like to move forward. Modifying a monument sign or adding a new type of sign.
I'd say add the new type of sign.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Keep them separate.
I
Very good.
like the qualification in there.
I guess, my thoughts are that that's just opening up the door. And although that particular sign, you could specifically spell it out, but there'd be a lot of ways to turn that to where,
Yeah, there could be some ways around that. I mean, this one in particular obviously looks nice. It's not considered a pole sign by any objective or casual observer, but it clearly doesn't qualify as a monument sign. So then the question would immediately arise, and then all of a sudden you'd be seeing these type of signs coming before the planning commission, because I'd be hesitant to approve it as one versus the other when it's a clear,
if the columns on either side were 20 feet tall, would it be a pole sign?
Yeah, and that's kind of the question that comes up, because if this is taller, it still doesn't have 50% of the base of the same 50% width as it does of the display area, so that clearly that wouldn't be a pole sign still, but it wouldn't be a monument sign. So, and monument signs also stipulate right here that with little or no open space between the ground and the sign. So if this display area was pushed up really tall, obviously that'd be a lot of open space underneath it, and it wouldn't qualify as a monument sign that way either.
I guess I would ask the question, what direction do we want to go? I mean, this sign could easily be made a monument sign to conform with what we're saying here
Mm-hmm.
at not much of an additional expense.
You say just by filling in the bottom.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, which is what you're saying. We're kind of opening the door here. So, but if we leave it as it was written, with no new type, and we don't take the 50% out,
Mm-hmm.
Well, but.
they'll be grandfathered in. If we had any of those that looked like that one, they'd
Right.
be grandfathered in until they wanted to change them. But then
it's-
what's to say? I mean, why would we not expect them to make a
So-
monument-looking sign, or why couldn't we expect them to?
That's a
make
good point too. So we could not have a 7 and just keep number 2 and just simply say that this person has to abide by the regulations of a
Because if you
monument.
go back to that, it says with little
Yes,
or no open space.
right.
So, I mean, if I was looking at that, that's little.
Right.
I mean-
Well, the space
What's little?
requirement is fine, but the 50%
Right.
50% requirement isn't met, but again, it wouldn't take much to meet it. But
Right.
Right.
Well, if these, and then once again, if these two did, if this and this equaled this, but this was pushed up and and let's say above my head, all of a sudden that's not considered little or no open space. That would still be, even though it's got a 50% and a 50%, it would not be considered a monument sign, at least by my standard. And that's pretty subjective considering, because little or no open space, little being 6 feet high or more would be no open, little space. So once again, it's kind of allows a lot of latitude there, but not that much. I think most people, if you were to look at that, would say this is not a lot of space here.
Yeah.
But it's completely at your discretion if you want to add another sign or not add another sign and strike this portion out to try to allow more types of monument signs, or leave this portion in and just require that these type of signs meet that monument sign standard.
I think if that's the direction that we're going, why should we vary from that direction?
Sounds good to me.
I think so. I mean,
Strike the 50%.
I'm still on the fence
That's what
on,
you're saying.
yes. No,
Do not
saying,
do so.
basically, make no change.
Make no changes to 101.
Don't add anything and leave the 50% requirement in and force people to move towards a monument-looking sign with 50% or more of the,
But
Of the
if we do that,
base.
Then we're adding the 7,
no.
just leave it the way it is.
Just
That's
leave
what
it the
we're
way it
saying.
is.
That's
No
what we're saying.
changes.
Just leave it as it was written before.
Leave it as
change.
is.
Okay.
But
We can do that.
Yeah.
Because they can apply for, like, that assignment, they could apply for.
They could ask for a
right?
variance, yes. That's an allowable. Article 7, which is guidelines for all the sign regulations, is pretty open for variances.
So there's the opportunity that
there is,
somebody can.
and I think that's
Yeah.
gonna bring less things in front of us than
Yeah.
having a
And-
7.
And since you brought up variance for signs, I think that we have gone completely stupid on variance for signs. I think that the one for the ice cream place, we did that so that they would come to town, and I don't think that would have stopped it. I just.
They already bought their lot, they were coming.
Well, that's right, and that and the outdoor power store, the vendors that he has wouldn't have pulled out if they didn't have their sign on the front. I think that we have gotten too easy going on that.
I don't know that the outdoor power store, the way they did it is bad.
Oh, I don't disagree with the way it looks, I'm just talking about the.
So that one didn't bother me. I agree wholeheartedly on the ice cream store sign.
Yeah, that was.
Okay, I'm done. I won't even bring up the liquor store.
Hindsight's always 20/20.
Come
So
on,
does-
for old time's sake, at the liquor store.
Does anyone else, I mean, do you see anything wrong with leaving it as it was? Is that,
No, I mean,
No,
it makes
I'm-
sense.
Yeah.
okay.
Do we need a motion on that?
No,
G1, 2?
we will, at the very end, it'll be changed. I'll modify the approval and then we can move forward. But I'm also taking notes and we were recording it, so I can just modify it. So 102 is general standards. They all stay basically the same except for L. So L is portable signs. There was an amortization period of signs for portable signs. Any portable sign legal in existence on the effective date of this amendment. 2, these regulations shall be allowed to remain at the same location until December 31st of 2005 as a legal nonconforming use. Obviously, this is expired. This is sort of administrative cleanup. When I see this, I go, it probably doesn't need to be there anymore, because 2005 has long since passed, and we can kind of remove it from the regulations.
Are we
Also,
talking, excuse me,
no, go for it.
are we talking about the signs on wheels?
Correct, yeah, so signs on wheels. So right now it says portable signs, following provisions apply. Portable signs defined as thus. Portable signs are prohibited. Legal non-conforming portable signs are still allowed until 2005. This doesn't apply anymore. We've since moved far past this portion of it, so it can be removed. Portable signs are still prohibited,
Yes.
if you're okay with that.
About all the help wanted signs.
Oh, what?
2 T-posts in the ground.
Oh, those are considered temporary signs. There's sort of a different definition for that. And they're allowed by our regulations if they're considered non-permanent and they only exist for a couple weeks out of the year. Then they have to be removed. We fondly refer them as bandit signs. We sort of drive around and see them. If they're still there, after a couple weeks, we remove them. So people can come pick them up. So this is something I wanted to add. I want to bring it before the Planning Commission. The following signs shall be exempt. This is 103, so this is part 3 of 5 of the sign regulations. Following signs shall be exempt. Temporary signs that serve to market a new business or residential development for a short period of time and are intended to be removed once the new business or residential development has been fully erected. All such signs shall be removed upon the sale of the last lot in the development or the occupancy of the building. The reason I threw that in there was because we've been considering a lot of variances for marketing signs for residential developments. And so we've had 2 of them in particular that came forward, and they want extra large signs that go with them to market in a similar way that Wichita markets. But the way the regulations are written, since they're abutting an R1 zoning classification, they can only really have 16 square feet for a sign, which is far short of what they are requiring for complete marketing or marketing as they see it. So I added that portion in there to specifically say, if you're doing it for residential development or for commercial business for short-term purposes, it could be exempt from the following regulations. It can be removed if you don't like that idea. It can be amended if you want to add more stronger language.
I like the idea, but should there be a time period for them to take this sign down?
Well, there is for development, once the
And
last
occupancy.
lot's sold, but for businesses, there's
Now,
not.
once the last lot's sold.
Occupancy of the building. That's what the last,
Is
so,
there a
or the
period?
occupancy of the
Because
building.
our neighborhood, I mean,
That's true.
somebody had to spray paint a member on it to get them to remove it.
Yes, I spoke to that developer about that sign because there was nothing in there that really prohibited, it never stipulated in our regulations when a sign had to come down. We knew at some point, objectively, it had to come down. The developer was using that sign to market another subdivision in Goddard at the same time. But once it became clear that the last lot had sold in that development, I asked him to remove it, and he removed it, so.
So is that a phase or the entire development? Like, what is it, Oak Ridge? I mean, it was,
It's usually an entire development. Once the sign is put up, they usually just take a face off of it and add another face onto it and say, now it's phase 2. Like if you go look at Elk Ridge off of Maple and 183rd, phase 2 is down, now you have phase 3 is up. So the sign's up until the development's done, and then it's supposed to be removed. At least I think that would be a reasonable expectation, but if you wanted to see something different, we could approach it differently.
What about for the business part of temporary sign to market a new business? Should there be a time limit on that?
Which is what that says, the occupancy of the building.
The occupancy of the building. So a commercial building, once it gets a CFO, that sign has to come down. And a CFO's certificate of occupancy means that people can actually be in the building. It's signed by MABCD and the business is open, then that sign has to come down.
That would apply to multi-tenant buildings as well.
Multi-tenant?
Multi-tenant buildings.
Yes. A CFO is signed for the whole building for a multi-tenant building. So once a CFO is signed, and maybe that's something I should add, instead of saying the occupancy of the building, I could put certificate of occupancy
Yeah.
for the building. And I can add that right now.
Do we want to put within 30 days, within 15 days, within, as date of? Do we need to get that specific?
Usually I like to give them some leeway.
That's
Developers usually have subcontractors that do the work. If it's raining, I don't want to hit them on the head. If it's boiling hot, I don't want to hit them on the head either, but I still want them to move forward and get a timeline. Usually I let them set a date and they start tearing down the face, and then they come back with a backhoe or something to tear the concrete and the pole out of the sign and so, or out of the dirt. So usually I want to say, we're starting this process.
Okay. That's fine. I just didn't know.
Usually what'll happen is if they don't comply, we start turning up the heat a little bit by restricting building permits, which will really get them going, or putting a stop work order on their inspections, which will really get them going too, and so then they'll comply a lot faster at that point.
Okay,
So,
that's fine.
but yeah, I usually don't try to set a deadline because we want to try to be as accommodating to the developer to move it at a reasonable pace without saying, if you don't, we're gonna hit you with the hard book. So, yeah. But I'm willing to write that in if you would like to see it.
It works for me. You've got other means, that's why I wanted to do it.
We have ways of encouraging them.
That's a nice way to say that.
Thoughts, comments?
I'm good.
104, so this is 4 of 5 for sign regulations. These are the districts. Obviously, we are going to be looking at an R4 and an RUI. So if we look at an R4 and an RUI, we have to go ahead and add it into the sign regulations now. It's not going to be a green and red with R4 or RUI because everything for R4 and RUI is brand new. So there won't be any red or green or red with slashes through it. So, but we're going to add those 2 districts in. So R1, R2, R3, we're already in there, and I'm adding R4. These stay generally the same, except of course a little dash for R4 over here. Then RUI is all brand new. The RUI district is exempt from all the requirements of sign regulations unless such sign causes a violation of health, safety, or welfare. Types permitted, all sign types are permitted. There are no limitations. And with R4, everything that applies to an R1 and R2 and R3 applies to an R4. And the reason I left RUI pretty open is because we're trying to leave that one as open as possible for everything that's existing right now in the county.
Question on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Does everything that borders the city have to be included in coming into the city? Like my place, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
if there are 3 or 4 or 5 properties between me and the city, do they all have to come in before I do?
So that's a good question. Are you talking about annexation or are you talking about sign regulation? Okay, so with annexation,
Yeah, I'm kind of off track, but
for the sake of the question, annexation requires usually that if you annex one, you can annex several at the same time. There's other stipulations. If it's agricultural, it can't be over 21 acres. We would have to get a petition. You can't unilaterally annex it. If it's platted, we can annex as many platted properties sequentially in a row as is allowable, all the way up, for a good amount of time, basically. I don't think there's any regulation that says that we can't annex a mile of properties if they're all annexed sequentially and they're platted.
but if the ones in the middle.
Yes, I can't annex your property without annexing the ones in between them.
That's my question. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, the county would frowns upon that. They're called island annexations. So the land in between your property and the city, if we could annex all the way up to your property and your property in one go, that would be acceptable. To annex just your property without annexing the ones in between is called an island annexation. The Board of County Commissioners has to approve that. They typically frown on it. I know Augusta's done it a couple times, but I don't know how often that actually occurs. So it becomes a little bit more cumbersome. But, technically it's possible, but normally it has to be in a linear process. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So yeah, once again, R4 is basically just emulating R1, R2, and R3, and then RUI is pretty open.
Good.
Any thoughts, comments on that? Do you think we should be stricter with the RUI since they're going to be in the county and at some point we're going to be annexing them? Or do you think that once we get to that point, then it'll be
Right now,
different?
you just need to worry about annexing.
Yeah, okay.
Once it gets more dense, then they'll come out of an RUI anyways.
Probably, yes, and then it would have more strict.
Effect.
Yeah, so if it was an RUI, they'd have pretty open. But if they got rezoned to an R1, R2, or R4, immediately those sign regulations kick in and they become really constricted in what they can do.
Right, so you wouldn't, it doesn't encourage,
No, and it's not like you see a lot of signs out in the
Yeah.
county anyway, because there's not a reason to market out in the county. Unless there was a big commercial development or something, like a Dillon's Warehouse or something like that, so. Small publication cost per state law, it's approved as to form, so it is recommended that the planning commission approve the changes to the sign regulations outlined in exhibit G.1A. And I would just change that and say, approve the changes to sign regulations outlined in exhibit G.1A with the changes discussed during this meeting, so.
Looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend to approve the changes to the sign regulations outlined in Exhibit G1A with the changes we talked about tonight.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Everything discussed here in old business, G1, G2, G3, and G4, G5, will also have to be approved by the city council. So this is G2, Design Guidelines Amendment. As the city grows, more businesses are being attracted to the residential boom that is being experienced as I see new potential clients in a burgeoning market. All new commercial buildings typically require a site plan which outlines what is architectural style of building is, excuse me, is, as well as the bill of material. As construction costs increase, some property owners are desiring to build rolled metal buildings on commercial lots for principal buildings or for accessory buildings. Design restrictions do restrict these types of structures, and some new buildings have been allowed to be built with rolled metal. They do, however, require metal facing to be clad with something like stucco, stone, brick, etc. On May 10th, 2021, Planning Commission and the governing body and the City Council discussed the design standards in detail. City planner being myself created a draft amendment reflecting these comments, which is being presented today. Once again, green lettering shows text included. Red strike through means that we're removing it. And then this is the analysis, and if some of you remember this from May 10th, metal structures either for storage or use, buildings for square footage greater than 200 square feet shall not have sides faced with metal cladding. Facing materials of these structures shall be stone, brick, stucco, or other approved materials. All private, and the applicability of it is all private and public principal land uses shall be submit site plans and required drawings. So this is kind of this whole loophole situation we've seen with some of these accessory buildings and some commercial buildings, and we're trying to close that loophole. So we struck metal structures either for storage use or building. Business uses of a square footage greater than 200, we struck this portion of it. It says metal structures for primary or accessory buildings shall have facing wrapped with materials such as stone, brick, stucco, or other approved materials. This shall be a requirement if any side is abutting a street or is considered significantly exposed to the public from the street it is facing. This will be determined by the community development director or their representatives. It is determined that the building meets one of these two requirements, must be wrapped in the soffit level of that side of the building. This shall be for the commercial and industrial buildings only. Residential structures shall not be of rolled metal for primary residences. Rolled metal shall be acceptable for accessory uses to a residential property. It must comply with Article 6, which is accessory buildings. Anyone desiring to avoid this requirement either partially or in full can apply for a variance before the Planning Commission. So this kind of goes into rolled metal, and then I added some graphics because that always helps everybody out. Empty lot, not significantly exposed on the street it is facing. So we're going to also look at it from a perspective, and we're looking at it right now from an aerial point of view. We're also going to look at it from a elevation point of view. So right now I would consider this not significantly exposed. There's only a portion of it being exposed beyond building A. Building B is predominantly hidden behind building A. It's only a portion of it is exposed, so I would consider that not significantly. It is obviously significantly exposed over here, but since it's abutting this street, it's not significantly exposed on the street it is abutting. Now it is considered significantly exposed, the street that it is facing, so this portion of the building on building B, all of it is being wrapped on that side. Once again, D is abutting this street right here, so we're going to require facing here. A facing B, since significantly exposed, is faced, and C, since it's on a corner lot abutting two streets, is faced on the two sides it is abutting. You guys have any thoughts, comments on that one?
I think it looks good.
I like it.
Long time coming.
I think it's just trying to make sure we capture what was discussed on May 10th. And Jody, I know Commissioner Crowe, that you weren't there on May 10th, but we went into detail for about 2.5 hours on everything that a good portion of what we're discussing today, and this was one of the topics. And so
I read a good portion of it.
I hope it was insightful. So once again, two empty lots, so now we're looking at it sort of as an elevation. This one is faced. The one behind it is not significantly exposed, but now I would consider it significantly exposed, so then it was required for facing on the street that it is abutting. So once again, this car could see it from this side, but that's not the street it's abutting. There's an empty lot here. The assumption is that at some point these empty lots are going to be filled. So that's kind of, and the discussion came up, if you're looking through the buildings once it's developed, is that acceptable? And that's, if it's facing if it's clad with something else on a rolled metal building that's on the side that's facing the street, it would be considered acceptable. So not significantly exposed, now significantly exposed. facing is required. Small publication costs per state law, approved as a form. It's recommended that the planning commission approve the changes to design guideline regulation outlined in Exhibit G.2A.
I'll make a motion to approve the changes to the design guideline regulations outlined in Exhibit 2 or G2A.
All second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Item
Did we-
G3.
I thought we bored him to death.
Then we got there.
He's obligated to stay until the H items. G3, the general business district. So this one was actually particularly important both before the planning commission and the city council. So I believe we're going to be considering this one right away before the city council on June 21st. But commercial zoning with a residential component is typically referred to as mixed use. It is a structure that hosts both commercial and residential uses, often seen as commercial on the first floor and residential above. This type of land use is becoming more prominent across the nation for development. It is a positive trend for development as it introduces more density for potential commercial customers in a smaller area, as well as increasing commercial property value. Excuse me. Currently, the only zoning that will allow for this is in Central Business District, C1, which is only a couple of blocks from Santa Fe to 3rd. Amending the General Business District, C2, to allow for residential mixed-use types would open the zoning classification up to host more residential rental properties on commercial lots. On May 10th, 2021, the Planning Commission and the governing body discussed the idea of commercial mixed use in detail. City planner created a draft amendment reflecting these comments, which is being presented today. Analysis. So this is directly from the subdivision regulations, Article 4, zoning districts, C1. Dwelling units constructed in conjunction with and above the first floor of business establishments is considered allowed. No building, and this is C2, no building shall be used for residential purposes except an existing residence versus a legal non-conforming use. So once again, green is being introduced, red is being struck from the records. On C2, I went ahead and added childcare facilities. I'll explain that in a little bit. Residential units in conjunction with and above commercial uses, apartments, condos, and boats and RV storage, and I'll explain that in a little bit as well. So the question of childcare centers has come up, and childcare facilities. Since it was not explicitly listed as a child care facility in the commercial district, I decided we would want to consider adding it and bring it before the planning commission, even though I would consider child care facilities a service business. So if somebody said, can I build a child care facility in a G2 and this was not included, I would still say yes, because I would consider it a service business, such as personal services. But so the question came up, to make it kind of abundantly clear, I went ahead and added child care facilities in there. And I brought it before the Planning Commission to say, since child care facilities are sort of regulated by the state, the only thing the state cares about is it acceptable to the zoning? Planning Commission deals with zoning. I figure I would add that in there and see if you guys were acceptable with that.
Just such as.
Such as. As you can tell from looking at these regulations and being more and more familiar with them, there is a wide latitude in there.
Yeah.
If we defined every single land use that was in every zoning classification, these regulations would be bigger than 3 phone books combined. It would just be dramatic. So they leave it such as Commissioner Crowe mentioned, to kind of give examples of it. But since child care facilities came up so many times, I figured to make it explicitly clear, I would throw that in there.
Mm-hmm.
The other ones are pretty straightforward. Residential units in conjunction with and above commercial uses, apartments and condos. I'm going to jump ahead real quick and I'll get back to boats and RV storage. Use limitations, I explicitly said, so instead of saying no building shall be used for residential purposes, I struck that out, said no single family detached housing or manufactured housing units. So no single family will be allowed commercial. Apartments and condos and residences above commercial will be allowed.
So does that, where do the duplexes and triplexes fall into that?
So duplexes and triplexes would be allowed if they were above a commercial use. They're not considered apartments, they're not considered condos, they're not single family, and so they'd be struck from here. But if you put a duplex or a triplex or multiple units, which are basically, a duplex is just 2 units.
Right.
So if you consider 2 units on top of a commercial, that could be considered acceptable. But it would also trigger a site plan because you're talking about a commercial district, so.
But I mean, in the use limit, in the next one, does that,
We could prohibit it, it's just, it might cause some confusion if somebody's saying, well, do I want to put 2 units such as a duplex on top of a commercial use? Unless someone explicitly says that a duplex is on the ground, 2 units, we could say that a traditional duplex, which being on the ground at grade level, is not allowed.
I just want to make sure we're covered.
Absolutely. I can add that in. No, it's just the problem is if I say no duplexes and somebody says I want to build 2 units on top of I suppose we could say those are 2 rental units that are not specifically defined as duplexes on top of a commercial building. We could say that.
I don't really get where it would be, I just wanna make sure that it's accounted for somewhere. I mean, like, cause it says no single-family detached housing.
Sure, absolutely.
Well, but still, I mean, you just said no detached housing, that would cover it.
Yeah, that'd cover a duplex also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, single-family detached is not a duplex, so, but we could say, I mean, we could just say no duplexes or no units at grade other than apartments and condos.
Although, I don't think it's gonna be a problem, because they're still gonna have to, it's a commercial zoning, it's gonna be a site plan. If the site plan's for a duplex on the ground, you're gonna tell them they can't do it.
That's true. I mean, that would be, we could, I mean, but we could also make that pretty explicit too, as Commissioner Crowe said. If we want to say no duplexes in the commercial district. Or would it be acceptable if there was a commercial building and those duplexes were next to it on the same lot? They created a courtyard area, would that be considered acceptable or no?
I don't think so, because basically that's kind of like the chiropractor's office there and the house next door to it.
Sure.
That was supposed to be torn down on completion of the chiropractor's office.
Might want to look into that.
Project.
I guess maybe explain to me what the use limitation means,
Use limitation means that you can't, it's not allowed.
to have commercial,
So use limitation means you can't have single family in this. You cannot allow these, all businesses and any type of provisions in there, so it's basically.
in that
Yes,
zone.
in that zoning classification, yes.
in that zoning classification.
Because you also see here, it says all businesses for the sale of self-service, et cetera, shall be conducted within a completely enclosed structure. So this one is not saying you can't have an enclosed structure, it's saying you have to have an enclosed structure. So another way of saying use limitations is saying use parameters. And it'd be really easy just to add no duplexes or,
I think the key there, though, is not to create confusion, as you suggested.
Yeah,
And the whole
absolutely.
purpose of adding the statements in there was to allow for these
Mhm.
additional options and
Right.
not cloud the use, I guess.
right, and at some point if somebody's saying they want to add duplexes to a commercial, they might want to just consider a rezoning. And we would bring the rezoning before the planning commission, because that's saying you're deviating from a commercial use at this point dramatically to just say you're
Yes.
just going to be doing duplexes. Then that would be a dramatic deviation from that district, and we just say, okay, well then you need to rezone it, and we'll take it before the planning commission. So I can add no duplexes in here, and anything that would require, if somebody's saying I want to build duplexes, we just say, well, that's a rezoning classification. We just have to get rezoned. Would that be in line with what you're thinking? Yes,
If it doesn't cloud it too much, yes.
I think,
Is it necessary? Is there going to be confusion?
I don't think it'll be
Is
too
someone going to
confusing.
want to build duplexes in the commercial classification?
It depends on how much land is available, really. At some point, the market sector pushes really hard against cities, and if all of a sudden duplexes are the best thing on the street, they're gonna start asking if they can build duplexes on commercial lots, probably. Yeah, and then we would have to say either you can't, and you need to get it rezoned, or you can. And if we say explicitly you can't, or you have to, you could build a duplex, but it'd have to be on top of a commercial, and then you have to have, you
If
know,
you just say no duplexes at grade
a grade.
without rezoning,
Yeah, we could do that.
and spell it out.
So to me, I guess that raises the question, if the section before is by inclusion,
Yes.
okay, then the limitation is by exclusion, then why are we specific? We're not gonna exclude the duplexes and, why are we excluding, saying we're excluding single-family detached?
Well, because I think what's going to happen is exactly what's been discussed a little bit, is that residential housing across the nation is at such a dramatic level right now. It's going to continue to be at such a dramatic level that people are going to start to question the zoning regulations if they can't. If it doesn't explicitly say they can't, they're going to ask why not. There's a kind of a legal standard there that says a right to build. If you can maneuver your way through the subdivision regulations and get to the end, shouldn't you have a right to build? And that kind of comes up a lot. If the planning commission says, no, you can't build it, even though you just made it through the subdivision regulations, what does that mean? And so there's been some legal disputes. If a developer says, I went through all your subdivision regulations, there's nothing in there that says I can't build a duplex, why can't I build a duplex on my commercial lot that I just bought? And so making it explicit, it helps sometimes. It removes that requirement. I can say, and I've said it before to people, that in my experience with the planning commission and the city council, it is my understanding, given the limitations of the subdivision regulations and my own individual and personal interpretation of it, that this would not be allowed. It's not written out explicitly, but in my understanding, generally speaking, it would not be allowed. And I can say that, but sometimes people want to see it in black and white. And it definitely helps an argument if you say, nope, it says it right here in the regulations, no duplexes at grade in a commercially zoned lot. That's kind of, it just helps these arguments.
It just kind of shuts the door.
Yes, and then they would say, well, the only other options you have is to rezone it.
But I guess at the end of the day, I mean, does the city council have to approve this too?
Yes. Yes, they do.
So if they have any hard feelings about it, they can always take it out.
Yeah, or what they would do is, if it was considered significant, or if this was a pivotal point, duplexes versus not duplexes, and they say, we want you to remove that phrase, no duplexes allowed in a commercial district, it would come back before the planning commission. So they wouldn't approve it. They would either approve it contingent upon a reapproval of the planning commission, in which case I'd bring it back before you in another month and say they want to consider this. So
I say we had it.
I'm going to add no duplexes at grade.
I mean, if you're gonna exclude the single family, why not just make them anything like that?
And then would we consider triplexes, quadplexes, et cetera, anything of greater than 2 units acceptable, or will we say no dwelling units at grade other than condos and apartments?
Well, if you do triplexes or quadplexes, like right across the street, and that big empty lot, there's a big one park.
Commercial would require on-site parking. Central Business District doesn't require it, but the C2, general commercial, would require on-site parking. I think it's 2 parking spots per dwelling unit. But at that point, it's basically becoming an R3, but we do allow apartments and condos. So I guess if you want to, we would have to define what an apartment is, and usually an apartment's defined as multiple stories going up. Whereas if you're having vertical, and it's all one unit, but it's it's horizontal, then that's considered different than an apartment complex. So
And is the difference between like a triplex or fourplex and condominiums ownership?
so a 3-plex, now we're getting into some nuance here, but a 3-plex or a duplex or a quadplex is usually owned by one developer and each unit is rented. Condominium is vertical, you have multiple units, but each unit is owned by one person. Sometimes they rent them, but one ownership versus one renter. So that way. So I can amend this portion to sort of say no at grade for duplexes, or 3-plexes or quadplexes, and then anything else, we can just say it's going to be reviewed during the site plan.
Okay.
Small publication cost per state law and approved as to form. It is recommended that the planning commission approve the changes to zoning classification C2 outlined in Exhibit G.3A with the changes discussed during this meeting.
I'll make a motion. We approve the changes to the zoning classification C2 outlined in Exhibit G.3A with the changes discussed in the meeting.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
G4, zoning addition R4 high density residential. So zoning classification was adopted as a regulatory control over land development. As market trends change, zoning classification should change as well to maximize land value and property taxes without compromising health, safety, and welfare. With residential housing considered a national issue and demand for rental properties increasing within the city limits of Goddard, this new zoning classification allows for a streamlined entitlement process with revised bulk regulation for creativity and design and density. And these new zoning classifications need to be approved first by the Planning Commission, finally by the governing body. Once approved by the governing body, they will become official 30 days after publication in the newspaper. So on May 10th, 2021, Planning Commission and the governing body discussed the idea of R4 high-density residential in detail. City planner created a draft ordinance reflecting these comments, which is being presented today. And obviously, R4 is all brand new, so there's not going to be any red or green. But allowable land use for single family and all types of residential structures, increased potential higher valuation. So any residential, this is all going to be R4 right here. So any residential development that is allowed within the zoning classification R1, R2, R3 will be allowed in R4. Basically, that avoids nonconformity.
Right.
If you have a zoning classification, you say R4 only will allow for everything except single-family detached, then anything that's single-family detached after it's been rezoned is non-conforming, and it can't be rebuilt if it's torn down. So that creates an issue, and also creates an issue for sellability when realtors reach out and say, hey, can this be sold, etc. Banks don't want to underwrite it because it's considered legally non-conforming. So it creates an issue almost immediately. So to avoid that issue, we just say everything that's allowed, R1, R2, R3, will be allowed in R4. And I added condos and apartments. Use is not permitted, heavy manufacturing, large retail stores, industrial, large commercial developments. Conditional uses will be boutique shops, and conditional uses have to come before the Planning Commission. Boutique shops must be built in conjunction with a dwelling unit, bakeries with a dwelling unit, small retail shops in conjunction with a dwelling unit, coffee shops, bookstores with a dwelling unit. So these would be considered conditional uses. And what they would do is basically have a small boutique shop with a dwelling unit on top, similar to what you see over on Main Street with commercial on bottom and a residential dwelling unit on top.
What about the service? Because that's the service industries was in that other.
What's the question?
Because you don't, like, that list, the conditional uses, it looks like the same list that was in the other one that included the acceptable uses. Then but it also.
Where you added childcare.
Like where you added the childcare,
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
so that, I don't see that included or excluded in the R4.
Oh, this zoning classification is somewhat different. So
Okay.
if we went back and looked at that one real fast.
I'm just asking, is it
What
the
was that?
intent that that's excluded or included?
Oh, so yes. So these would be the uses that are not permitted. These are to be permitted uses. These would just be the conditional uses. And so are you saying, sorry, maybe I'm not understanding the
But
question.
see, it would fall under an R2 or another
Which one is that?
childcare.
Childcare.
Like the
Right.
childcare and the physical fitness certain
Services,
category?
those are commercial, this is residential, so it's just considered a completely different zoning classification.
Right, but I'm just asking because you included the other commercial, like the boutique shops, the bakeries, the.
Yes, yes, and so in this case, the reason I included just specifically these ones, boutique shops, bakeries, small retail shops, coffee, and bookstores, is because usually those have a smaller footprint,
Right.
and they can be intermingled, interspersed in dense residential areas, where you're not going to have, I mean, I guess we could say you could put a childcare if we wanted to consider that.
Permitted uses.
Right.
If we wanted to consider that specifically, but then also we have a catch-all. Anything not specifically listed in permitted uses that could be allowed as a low intensity land use, but must be in conjunction with the residential structure. All such uses must be approved by Planning Commission. So this becomes a catch-all at the very bottom to say, hey,
Yeah.
if this is something that we wanted to consider as a conditional use, because it's not explicitly said that it's allowed under an R1, R2, R3, or R4, then it has to come before the Planning Commission for a conditional use. So that kind of creates that catch-all at the very bottom.
So is that last sentence, is that part of C?
Right. This is all part of C. So anything not specifically listed as permitted uses
So
could be
that
allowed.
covers all the other,
Yes.
okay.
These are kind of general examples too. I guess I could put such as at the top, if that helps.
Really, it opens it up to where that's not a definitive list.
Right.
Yeah, because that's why I was asking that, because you had the definitive list of uses not permitted and a definitive list of conditional use.
Right.
So,
It becomes malleable that way, and that's the reason this one is a little bit more malleable than, say, the commercial district is because it includes R1, R2, R3, whereas the commercial C2 is just C2. It doesn't include any other commercial districts. R4 includes R1, R2, R3 included, which has allowed uses and not allowable uses.
I think
and
that
then-
last sentence covers
Yeah, and then we sort of have a catch-all at the bottom.
anything.
You can sympathize with the zoning regulations now as we interpret them as market forces start pushing on the city and we try to figure out how we want to move forward. We either become more exclusionary or more inclusionary and how we want to manage that, especially given certain situations like an R1 district. We wouldn't want to exactly have a bakery in the middle of an R1 district where you might want to have a bakery or a small bookstore in an R4 district if it's high density and there's lots of residential units allowed it that are multiple stories. And so there's different ways where land use would be considered acceptable and other land uses would not be considered acceptable. And so how we manage that just is on an annual basis, just recurring regulations and review and see what the planning commission wants to consider. Any other thoughts on that one? Do you want me to add any text in there to help, or?
Unless it be such as above those.
I can add such as.
Yeah, I think that just covers it.
I can put such as, but not limited to. Maybe that would help as well, just to kind of say, this, we're giving you examples here, so it's not become so definitive.
Yes,
I think
agreed.
so, and we still have a catch-all at the bottom anyway.
Yes, I can add that. So lot size requirements, I'm putting none. The reason I'm putting none is because of a conversation I had with Commissioner Klein in the hypothetical situation of a tornado striking a town. All the lots that we have, a certain portion of them would be considered legally non-conforming. There are legally non-conforming now. So if it's legally non-conforming and a tornado comes through and demolishes some of the towns, some of the properties in town, they want to be able to be rebuilt. So if they're rezoned in R4 and there's no minimum lot area, lot width, or lot depth, they can be rebuilt. It's sort of another way of helping out with that situation with removing legally non-conforming properties, legally non-conforming lots.
It may be hypothetical, but it's not improbable.
Not in Kansas, from what I understand.
And not where we're located on the edge of Wichita.
Yes. So this is just another way of helping to remove legally non-conforming uses and legally non-conforming lots. Vault structure height, 40 feet. Obviously, all this is, if you feel any of this is too much, too little, not defined, feel free to speak out and we can amend it accordingly. Minimum front yard, I reduced it to 10. This is per our discussion on May 10th. Side is 6. That actually doesn't change from R1, R2, R3. Sides have always been 6. Minimum rear is 10. I've reduced it from 20 to 10. I've reduced the front from 25 to 10. Maximum lot coverage, none. And the reason is, of course, that the more building you have on a lot, the more property taxes it generates. And obviously, if it's a rental unit and you have more building on the lot, less code compliance issues, because then the developer will have more property taxes and hopefully property manager, they're managing less grass, less landscaping. We won't have as much code compliance issues if that were to come up. So all developments within the zoning that are not single-family detached or duplex must be accompanied by a site plan. Site plans shall be required for all duplexes that are arranged around a courtyard. This is currently existing in R1, R2, and R2 requires that all duplexes arranged around a courtyard be developed with a site plan. Developments can occupy all the lot space allowable and must account for parking within that space. Development shall maximize the space first abutting the street frontage, and that's the whole idea of trying to push it up to that 10-foot setback so that you have more backyard and less front yard.
So that they have to account for parking, so is
Mhm.
the number, is there any somewhere else?
It's 2 parking per dwelling unit.
Two parking.
That's a parking calculation, I believe our Article 11 has that requirement for parking calculations. I might have to double check what article that is, but we do have a parking calculation requirement.
And on the structure height, that's, Bill, just help me, is that like a 3 or 4 story? 40 foot?
Typically 4-story. Most
Depends on the
stories are
roof,
10.
looks like what the roof line looks like though. I mean,
Yeah.
if it's a peaked roof, then you wouldn't be looking at 2.
So with that, I'm just thinking about, talking about, odd situations, that maximum structure height. Let's say you've got 2 single-family
Yeah,
residential, and somebody just comes in and wants to put a 3 or 4 story thing
right.
somewhere, is that,
Yeah, according to this, it'd be allowed. They would have to submit a site plan and we would present it before the planning commission. It's a good question, simply because at some point, are we gonna go vertical to maximize our land, or are we just gonna keep going horizontal? For the city, it's more economical to go vertical, because that way the cost is borne by the developer instead of by the city, and we maximize property taxes. It does create an awkward question for the neighbors. I mean, LA, for example, requires a shadow site plan. We could require a shadow site plan, moving forward, something to consider, but
I just think about like the one over there on Second Street and all the, that was just with it was 5, started out as 5-plex and went down to 3,
Yes,
there
yes.
was, it was next to the single families, and there was not a lot of love for that. And,
There's some
I
consternation.
could just see, and I wouldn't want, if I was in a single family dwelling neighborhood and somebody wanted to put this 3-foot or 3-story structure. So I don't know if there's something you can put in there that says that it's, not so much higher than
Existing.
surrounding or
I
something.
think that would be
I
for
don't
us to
know.
determine.
Yeah, when it comes before us.
It's gonna be a site plan,
That's true, yeah.
so.
if it's single
Really-
family and duplexes, they're not gonna be taller, generally speaking, than the
Yeah.
ones around it. If it does go higher than that, it would have to come before
40
the planning
feet's
commission.
not, it seems tall, but
Yeah.
it's not. I mean, that's the height of, almost the height of my chimney chase, so,
Okay.
you know.
Shall I continue?
Please.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, small publication cost per state law and approved as the form. It is recommended that the planning commission approve the inclusion of zoning classification R4 high-density residential outlining exhibit G.4A. And I don't believe any of the comments needed to adjust that unless, did I miss something? No, okay.
Unless you think the such as needs to be,
I can add the such as, so then including the comments as discussed during
that
this
was under the
meeting.
conditional use.
That's right, yes, I will put such as but not limited to.
For a motion.
I make a motion to approve the inclusion of the zoning classification R4 high-density residential outlined in Exhibit G.4A with
Comments.
today's discussion.
I'll second.
Comments?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 G5, and then we'll get to H1, so we will be there.
Might have to go wake him up.
Zone addition, rural, urban intent. So as city grows, it opens an opportunity for the boundary of the city to be expanded and annexation to occur. When this happens, certain properties that have existed as stockyards, horse stables, or other county-related uses become non-conforming when they are annexed. These land uses have no definition under our current zoning and would be either non-conforming or require a conditional use permit for certain properties as they are brought on board. To prevent this, a less stringent, more county-friendly zoning classification would be introduced to alleviate the necessity for wrestling with these land uses and code violations when the property owner agrees to annex. On May 10th, 2021, Planning Commission and the governing body discussed the ideas of RUI, rural urban intent, in detail. City planner created a draft ordinance reflecting these comments, which is being presented today. Current regulations found Articles 4, zoning districts. There is no RUI in the current Article 4, but this is where the RUI would go into. So these would be the permitted uses. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward from the single-family portion of it, churches and other similar places of worship, golf courses, public and private schools. We start getting down, event center, farmer's market, dog kennel, agricultural, livestock holding, commercial holding, utility stations, animal care clinics, stables or riding academy, agricultural sales and services, agricultural storage. So these are the things that you're going to typically see. We do have dog kennels in the city currently. We have a dog kennel actually on Public Works, which when we find stray dogs, the police department will grab them and bring them to Public Works, and we have a kennel there. The vet clinic obviously has a dog kennel. We use them as overflow if we catch a lot of dogs, or if we have one that needs to be euthanized, we take them to and they have a dog kennel for that. Everything else, though, is generally not allowed except for anything that's a legally non-conforming use. For example, Streets is considered legally non-conforming because it's a butcher shop. They have a livestock pen in the back. Other than that, the example I would be thinking of would be the horse stable off of Maple. I brought that up on May 10th. There's a horse stable off of Maple and 183rd on the northeast corner there. That's defined under stables or riding academy. So typically things you would see out there: agricultural sales and storage, agricultural storage for grain. I'm thinking of grain silos. I'm trying to cover everything that you can imagine being in the county. It's generally prohibited under almost every other zoning classification. We throw it into the RUI. These, and I'm going to talk about this during the city planner report, these permitted uses actually don't even make it into our general definitions for land uses, so I have to add them to Article 2 of the subdivision regulations, which actually defines what these are. So I'm going to have to add another portion of definition, which the Planning Commission is going to have to consider for amending Article 2 of the subdivision regulations that defines what is an animal care clinic, what is a stable, what is a riding academy, etc. So we'll be considering that next month.
What about RV storage?
I was just wondering that.
It's not on.
Should we add RV storage to that? Just to say- That's literally just like on the edge.
I mean,
Right. Oh, that's a good point. So
doesn't really fall under anything that's on there right now.
Right.
That poor guy go back through that again.
So under the general business district for uses, we added a boat and RV storage here. The reason was because it didn't seem defined anywhere. There was nowhere where it was really defined clearly that boat and RV storage. And as mentioned during that planning commission meeting, that person's lot was rural residential. That, as the gentleman from Wichita mentioned, the next one up that would actually allow it to be commercial. Our commercial didn't explicitly list it as boat and RV being allowable. So I throw boat and RV storage here as being allowable under a commercial district. Question is, do you want to have that under RUI, or do you want to? Oops, excuse me. Let me go back. Do you want to have boat and RV storage under an RUI to save a gentleman a headache, or do you want to reconsider it under RUI? Well, I'm happy to add boat and RV storage.
The question I ask, that I don't understand, is all he would have to do is make the request and pay any fees, right? And he could have it rezoned.
If you approve the
Or
rezoning.
still has to come.
Yeah, so,
Okay,
and then
okay.
that's the
That's what I
point.
was Okay.
And that's a weird, I would have to bring that before the city attorney. The way they approved it, and I'm going to bring that back up on the city planner report today. I'll talk about it a little bit because that came up. The way it was approved was a 10-year contingency, with the assumption that it's going to be under the city of Goddard in under 10 years, and then at which point it would expire, and then the city of Goddard can decide if we want to keep it or not. And so the question is, if we annex it in under 10 years, does it get to keep it anyway? That's a legal question I cannot honestly answer. I'd have to defer to the city attorney. And so I will draft an email to kind of ask that, to kind of hash it out. I know it's kind of out of sight, out of mind right now, but I mean, it's a good question. So the question is, if we did put boat and RV storage and we annexed them under an RUI, he would be fine.
Yes.
But you think that's a good idea?
I think it's a good idea.
I shall add.
Yeah, I mean.
I think that guy just spent enough money going through all that.
Yeah.
I don't want to put it back there again in a year.
Acceptable?
Yeah.
I shall add it. Once again, no limits, because county's like a type of no man's land. You go out there, it can be anything. It's kind of like the Wild West. All types of land uses, all types of lots, all types of animals. So, maximum structure height, I did put 45 feet. I thought that might be acceptable, but also there might be some extenuating circumstances where it might go
What-
higher.
The metal building on the east side of 167th, almost to 21st Street. Is it taller than that? You know what I'm?
45? I don't think it's probably
Okay.
45 feet.
I'm trying to think of which middle building you're talking
It's
about.
the fairly new one,
On the east
South of
side.
21st.
south of 21st on the east side of the street.
Across from the cattle farm.
Yeah. It's big red building.
Oh man, I'd have to drive up to see it.
Okay. I was just curious how tall it was. 'cause
Is
that-
if it's
that
a
would
Trish,
be
I think. I mean, yeah, Commissioner Grafen would probably know better than I would.
It's close.
1,000 times, yeah, I don't think it's over 45 feet.
Okay.
Should we go higher? Do you think?
That was the only reason I was asking, because that's a fairly sizable building. That it's on the wrong side of the street for the intentions, but you may find out other places.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And I know that we're talking about annexing an airplane hangar as we head north. I don't know how tall airplane hangars get for those small little, single engine.
I've done airplane hangars out there in Benton, and I've never ordered a 45-foot piece of metal for them.
Okay. Yeah, just trying to take into consideration. I mean, obviously grain silos are pretty dramatic as well. So I don't know if that would be an exemption, or I don't know how we'd really want to tackle that.
And why do you need a structure height? I mean.
I could say no limitation. Typically, it's how much regulatory authority do you want to have on this RUI district, and I'm sort of playing it out just to see how the Planning Commission and the City Council feels about that portion as we start to grow that way. Do we say it's a free-for-all and continue to be a free-for-all, which is generally what we were leaning towards, or do we want to say, well, if we start seeing water slides in people's backyards, do we actually put a stop to that? That's kind of the question.
I guess I would be curious, is your intention to utilize that for the sole purpose of annexing? Or would it be there?
No one
with
could
the intention
really.
that people would approach us to have their current properties changed?
Definitely the first one, not the latter. We would want to be, for the purpose of annexing, to be county friendly with the annexation, but no one in the city limit currently who's under any type of other zoning classification could approach the planning commission for an RUI.
Is that spelled out?
Which is what
No,
I'm
it's
wondering
not
about,
spelled
like,
out because
RV
that
guy.
would kind of be counterintuitive to the Board of Zoning Appeals, which falls under the Planning Commission. Technically speaking, we would want to bring it before the Planning Commission if somebody actually asked for it. I could always say it is in the city's interest that we do not reverse that where we go from an R1 to an RUI. The assumption is that everyone's going to start off as an RUI and slowly become denser as we grow out in that direction. That's the assumption. So
Yeah, and I'm sure there will be instances where it would be justified to go to it.
there might be some
something already-
considerations.
I was just curious what you were thinking, because
I did, yeah.
if the intentions, or if
Yeah.
the main purpose is for the annexation process, I don't know that you need a height.
I can strike it.
Yeah, that the grain
Now,
silos.
now if
catch
you
it for
anticipate
you.
people requesting it on a regular basis, then I think we need it, you know what I mean?
Right. I think that that would be at the discretion of the planning commission, but I think it makes sense that we should strike probably the height off of it, include boats and RVs, and say that, for most people who are asking for it, if it's not considered a legitimate use, it's pretty straightforward. If somebody's saying, hey, I want an RUI because I want to have pigs in my backyard off of Richard Road in Old Goddard, probably doesn't make sense, right? And I'll be like, that's not going to be acceptable. But if somebody's like, hey, I currently have an R1 district, I was zoned R1, but I have this non-conforming use and I want to be RUI, maybe it would make sense, and then it'll bring it before the planning commission. And so there could be examples in there of when you might want
Right.
to convert it.
I was just, like I said, I was just curious if the main purpose was.
The main purpose is
We may
to
not want to,
bring in county-friendly zoning, basically.
we may not want to cut ourselves short.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I don't see any reason to get
Too
picky about
technical.
that.
Very good. I can strike 45 feet, make it no limitation, include boats and RV storage. Any other considerations or changes that you'd want to see? So once again, small publication cost per state law, approved as the form. And it would be the recommendation to approve the inclusion of zoning classification RUI rural urban intent outlined in Exhibit G.5A with comments and changes as discussed today during this meeting.
I'll motion
I'll make a motion to approve the inclusion of the zoning classification RUI, rural urban intent outlined in Exhibit G 5.A with the discussion in today's meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Item H, H1, site plan for Arbor Creek Clubhouse. So, Folger and Associates has submitted a site plan application for Arbor Creek Clubhouse on behalf of the developer Marvin Schellenberg. Clubhouse is considered a commercial building, and each commercial building is required to have a site plan. This clubhouse is part of the Arbor Creek development at the intersection of 183rd and 23rd. There are 2 buildings on the site and a pool, and they will have they'll have to go through MABCD review and approval with their civil drawings before we will issue a building permit after approval by the planning commission. So it's another level of review. It's pretty stringent. Commercial buildings are different than residential. There's going to be 21 parking lots. 2 of them will be ADA. Lot coverage is 6.2%. 2 buildings and in 1 pool. Clubhouse is 2,205 square feet. Exercise room which is the other building, 966 square feet. And there's a covered outdoor patio at 749. This is not the scale, but this is an aerial image, a pretty recent aerial image, and then I just dropped some squares on it to kind of give you an idea of where it's at. You have more detailed images in your on your agenda packet. This is a little bit more detailed of where you can see the layout. So you're going to come in off of Arbor Creek Road, and then turn in here with the parking, and then there's some additional future parking if the need would occur. We can extend the parking out that way. So this is an example of the north elevation. This is the south elevation. And this is a concept image. So Don with Folger and Associates is the gentleman in the back. If you guys do have any questions, feel free to ask him, and he's willing to answer them.
Kind of a southwest view.
Is that a criticism or approval?
Kind of cool. It doesn't look like our normal, Kansas clubhouses.
Looks upscale.
Mm-hmm.
This is similar to what they did in Talia.
Italia Development. Yeah, I haven't seen their community center, but I imagine there are competing interests.
That's a good idea. What's that?
I did bring that up. So, yes, that question came. When I first saw this, I thought this was rolled metal. And then I saw that it was board and bat.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit, if you would? Oh, yeah, I should probably should. We're moving it out.
Yeah. We did in Talia.
The walls are not metal, it's board and bat. They haven't really picked exactly how they're gonna do that, but, board and bat is pretty straightforward, so. But the roof is metal. They call it California style. That's what they call it. So, and it's supposed to be fairly upscale, all the things they put into it with the pool and the exercise building, the clubhouse building, and there's actually pickleball courts sits on the end of the pool that was in the site plan too. And then there's that rendering doesn't show it, but at the far right hand side of that clubhouse building is an outdoor area right in there. That's a separate type of a space. And then under that, this rendering, there was not a covered roof on the patio, but we've made that covered now. So, not there, that over there, yeah, that's covered.
Oh, I see.
That originally was just like that, and then we made it covered. And But otherwise, it looks pretty much like that. Those are bifold glass doors. We've changed those to a rolling glass door like you see in a lot of the restaurants. That was a cost issue. They're trying to be pretty upscale with this.
So you're sliding patio doors now? Is that what you're doing?
No.
No, we're not doing the sliding pad. We're doing rolling
Oh, okay.
Instead of buying
Glass.
with glass. They're all glass.
Yeah, that look nice.
That clubhouse, that whole building is just one big open area there, that part that you see. Now, the restrooms and stuff are kind of back in that little corner back there, but that with the glass on the other side, it's pretty open.
Yeah.
Very nice addition to that. Addition.
Any other comments, questions about this? So financially, none. Legally, it's approved as the form. It is recommended that the planning commission approve the site plan for the Arbor Creek Clubhouse.
Make a motion to approve site plan for Arbor Creek Clubhouse.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Discussion at all? I guess we're holding on discussion. Aye. Unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome to sit for the city planner report, or
Come on.
Got 3/4 of it. Thank you.
So, item I, staff report. The planning of Tanganyika land. So Phil Meyer of Baughman has stated that they are in the process of getting the land platted that was swapped to the city for Jim and Matt Fouts. They anticipate having this before the planning commission in the next couple of months. It will need to be a preliminary and a final plat, with the planning commission approving the preliminary and the final, and the governing body approving the final. So the platting is required because they got their concept plan for the PUD. So I think if you remember back in, I think it was 2019 or 2020, this all starts to blur together, but I think it was the end of 2019, Jim Fouts came before the planning commission with a concept idea for the PUD. PUD now has to go through 4 stages. It didn't used to. It used to have to be everything defined right away. Now it can be a process, but it's still a lengthy process. It's 4 parts: a concept PUD plan, preliminary plat, final plat, and a final concept plan. So this would be steps 2 and 3, and he still needs to do step 4 before they can get any building permits. So there would be PUD step 1, PUD step 2, PUD step 3, and PUD step 4. This is PUD step 2 and 3. So they're working towards it right now, and they're hoping to start building some new amenities soon in the next couple of years, and so they're getting the platting done, and then they're going to submit a final site plan for the PUD, which is going to define everything of where the buildings are, how much square footage, what kind of amenities it is, and everything else in between. So the platting is going to help get through that PUD process. And that's that land right there. So this is current Tanganyika in the city lagoons, 199th. This is Hopkins Road. This is the land that the city swapped and they want to go through, and they had a stage 1 of PUD approved already. Now they're on 2 and 3. You want to move that up a little longer? Once again, Phil Meyer of Baughman has stated that they are in the process of getting the land platted as owned by Aaron Schnook. That land is already platted, but it needs to go through a replatting due to the nature of the new developments being proposed. It will need to be a preliminary and final plat with the planning commission approving the preliminary and the final, and the city council governing body approving the final. That land is right over here. As you remember, this used to be the old Eagle gas station that had the tanks in the ground. Those tanks have been taken up. Secretary of Transportation owns this portion here. Aaron Schnook owns this down here. There have been several different developments being proposed, and this would require basically all of it to get replatted. I believe Aaron Schnook wants to purchase a portion of the Secretary of Transportation's land, about this much, leaving this portion here for the future right-of-way for 54 when it gets elevated.
Is my understanding that he's trying to swap those 2 pieces of land, the north piece on the left, right beside that for
I guess we'll have to see. I hadn't heard that. First, my understanding is, which would, I mean, in some sense, that would make sense because if the right-of-way cuts through here, then it would continue to cut through here.
Yeah, that was my understanding.
So it's possible, it hasn't been conveyed to me yet, but that would make sense. I don't know why the Secretary of Transportation would even consider getting rid of this unless they're probably getting this in return. Because that would save them more right-of-way acquisition costs. That's probably my assumption. So I'm guessing they'll probably, this will become Aaron Chinooks and this will probably become KDOT's at some point. And then this will all
And
get.
that right, that street extension is, any idea how far off that is? I mean,
It's anybody's guess at this point. It's $500 million, so it could take a long time. And the anticipation is that it'll start in Mays and head down, cut over on 167 and come over on 54 and head west. And so it's a pretty dramatic project. And I don't know when that's going to happen. But the R-cut is going through, if that's what you're talking about as well. The city is moving forward with the R-cut to turn and cut into the frontage and down into the Starbond district where the baseball diamonds is, and the Genesis and all that. That's going through. But in terms of KDOT elevating 54, I don't know when that's going to happen.
Well, the access road on the south side of Kellogg is what I was referring to.
Oh, that I don't know. I don't think we're anticipating extending that anytime soon. This right now, this portion over here, this is considered private. The frontage is over in this direction over here. I don't think we're anticipating extending that this way anytime soon. Not right now, anyway. Just the R-cut portion is going in. Any questions on that? You'll have more details when I get more details. When they actually submit plating, we'll take a look at it and see what's going on. Administrative cleanup, I mentioned this earlier. Some of the new zoning classifications have new terminology used for land use types that will need to be added to Article 2, which is where you would find definitions of those types. This will require an amendment to Article 2, which will need to be published into the newspaper within 20 days to elapse before consideration for the Planning Commission. So I sent this over to the newspaper and for publication, so I'm hoping we can consider this next month, unless we have too many things to consider, because I'm also considering there's going to be a lot of other stuff coming up as well. So it depends on how fast developers and engineering teams can send me paper for everything we just mentioned, plating and other developments that I have yet to mention. If July is too packed out, then we'll probably consider that in August. So it just kind of depends. And this is kind of what it looks like. So black is already in our Article 2. Purple wasn't defined. Sometimes it seems somewhat intuitive. So, we can't define every land use in the world. It's impossible. But I noticed that Wichita defined them. And since Wichita defined it, I figured I could just copy what Wichita had, add it to our subdivision regulations, and remove all doubt. And so I'm going to add purple from what Wichita had. Blue also was in Wichita. They had some of it, and some of it had to be defined by using general terminology, like if you did a Google search. What is a livestock stable? How does Wikipedia define it? How does anybody define it? And use that general terminology to help people move these land uses along and to define it in Article 2. And that way it'll help sort of remove some of the ambiguity, at least, when we have some of these land use questions come up. And then 4, the CUP boat and RV storage at 19721 6th Street. Chair Van Amberg asked me to find out the conclusion of the CUP for boat and RV storage that was considered by the Planning Commission on April 12th, 2021. Board of County Commissioners considered the item on June 2nd, 2021 of this month. It was voted on with a 4 in favor and 1 against. Commissioner Jim Howell of District 5 voted no. A supermajority was required, which would require 4 or more of the commissioners to approve the CUP. The opposition of the CUP did speak at the June 2nd meeting of the BOCC and presented their case. This item passed and will be allowed to operate as a boat and RV storage in the county for a 10-year period. So I'm not particularly sure why Commissioner Howe, who's in District 5, which is not our district is District 3, David Dennis. I'm not sure why Commissioner Howe particularly voted no when everyone else voted yes, including our own district commissioner. But that's how it turned out, and 4 is considered a supermajority, so it passed. So currently, right now, it's allowed to operate for 10 years as boat and RV storage. And with that, item J, Planning Commissioner comments.
Nothing. It's either a very quiet group or we're all asleep.
And we talked a lot,
Or
we talked a lot the whole
Micah
time.
just did a great job. I think
flatter
you
me.
had to pass a speed reading test before you graduated.
It's all right. That's what I told my professors. I sped read it all, but really it was 1 out of every 5 pages. I was just,
Well, and we did cover a tremendous amount of ground. and I-
May 10th was
Yes.
extensive.
A
Yes,
lot.
May 10th was very extensive, so most of this was just review. But required by state law, so it's necessary that we review everything, make sure that what you are envisioning is being presented and being articulated and being written down and drafted accordingly, so that if there are any questions, it can be addressed.
And I would laugh. City commissioners have to go through all this too. Or city council.
Is that the meeting you're sitting in on?
Nope.
Would you like a motion? I don't know. Jody,
Hmm?
would you like to make a motion?
I make a motion to
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Adjourned.
Thank you very much.